Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. Thank you for joining us today. Listening in today, I believe we have athletes and coaches, administrators, even a few parents, journalists, researchers, referees. So it's certainly exciting to see such a great turnout and interest in clean sport. I appreciate all of you taking the time to be here today. I hope that everyone listening is healthy and safe. Some parts of the world are relaxing the quarantine restrictions, like right here in Switzerland. So we are slowly returning to what would be considered normal life. But I know that many of you are still in full lockdown. So wishing you all patience, keep your spirits high. And I guess it's all the more opportunity to join webinars like this one. My name is Olia Abasolo-Avchinnikova, and I am the Education Manager at the International Testing Agency and also a retired Olympian. So I will be co-presenting today and moderating this webinar. So people are still joining and coming into the webinar room, and I will take this opportunity to go through a few housekeeping items while this is happening. I can see all of you saying hello in the chat, so the room is quickly filling up. You can use this chat function to say hi to us, to write any general comments, and you can also use the Q&A function as well for your questions. So I highly recommend that you take advantage of the Q&A, and any questions that you see that are interesting in there, you can also upvote. Because we have such a large audience, we will not be able to address all the questions during the webinar, so we recommend that you go back to the Q&A, see what questions you want answered, and we will be sure to address those at the end of the webinar, or as many as we can. If there are still questions that we haven't answered and you want to get in touch with us, you can use this email address on your screen. So that's education@ita.sport, and write to us any questions you have, and we'll get back to you there. You'll also see a few poll questions pop up. So those are just our way of communicating with you. So you can see one that just came up on the screen there. You can answer these questions, or you can simply put them away and keep listening to the webinar. So totally up to you. As indicated in the registration form that you filled out, this presentation will be recorded, so it will be made available for viewing on our website. If you have any questions about this, let us know in the chat or simply email us at the email address that you see on your screen. And note that we will make both the slides of this presentation and the recording available to you, so you will receive it by email as an attendee of this webinar. A lot of housekeeping to get through, but we're almost there. So bear with me for a few more minutes, and this will give an opportunity to those joining a bit late to join right on time for the start of the webinar. There is a very limited number of personal data that was collected, so your email address and your name when you registered. So just a disclaimer from the legal team that this is, of course, not going to be used for any marketing purposes. And finally, note that you will receive an email from us at the end of the webinar with a survey. So we ask you to please take a few minutes to fill it out. Your feedback is very important. We are new to this webinar area and this way of education, so we look forward to having your feedback and hearing more about what you want to hear from us as well. I should also note that there is a lot to cover today, so the session was extended by 15 minutes. Instead of 60 minutes, we are now at 75. We will spend the first 60 minutes talking about the doping control process, and we will leave 15 minutes for the question and answer. So if you have to log off, not a worry, it's going to be recorded. And if there's a question that you asked, and you didn't get a chance to hear the answer, you can always view that recording later. Okay, that's it for housekeeping. Let's get right into it. Today's webinar is on the doping control process. So we will cover notification, forms, urine sample collection, and blood sample collection. So if you are new to the anti-doping system, or potentially even the sports system, then this is definitely a good introduction and a good way to learn more about the doping control process. If you have a lot of experience and you are an athlete that has been tested in the past, it's a good refresher. So great that you are here with us today and taking this initiative to learn more. We will also briefly speak about the rights and responsibilities, medications, a few other important topics, but note that these will be covered in further detail during other webinars. So you can see on your screen, there are 3 more dates that we will be connecting with you live through this platform. Just make sure that if there are any questions related to the topics that you see on your screen, that we keep those questions for the later sessions and focus as much as we can today on the doping control process. All right, at this point, I will take the opportunity to introduce our presenters. So with us, we have Marko Petric, who is a former judo athlete and member of the Slovenian national team. He's been subject to doping control as an athlete in the past, both in his junior and senior career. And Marko is also a qualified lawyer now who has 10 years of professional experience in anti-doping, having conducted tests all over the world. And Marko currently manages testing programs for combat sports at the International Testing Agency.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Marko.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. We also have another colleague, Lara, who will hopefully be joining a little later. I will introduce her as she logs on, so I will skip that introduction for now. And when Lara is online with us, I will make sure to introduce her as well. And of course, we have an Olympian joining us today to speak about his experience, having been tested many times throughout his career. Marc Mundell is an Olympic race walker who represented South Africa at the London 2012 Games, as well as the Rio 2016 Olympic Games. He is a continental record holder in the 50K race walk, and he is planning to make his 3rd Olympic Games appearance in Tokyo 2021. So Marc is currently completing his 2nd master's degree in Lausanne, Switzerland, but he's permanently based in Calgary, Alberta in Canada. So good morning, 6 a.m., a bright and early wake up to you, Marc, and thanks for being here with us.
Lovely to be here.
Excellent. So let's get into the topic that we are here for today, which is the doping control process. Before we begin, there are a few terms that you should be familiar with. There is the doping control officer, which is an official that has been trained and authorized by the Sample Collection Authority to collect a urine sample from an athlete. And that's in short DCO. And there's a blood collection officer who is a qualified official who collects a blood sample from an athlete. So you will hear these abbreviations quite often, BCO and DCO. So just making sure that you are familiar with those. Now, a chaperone is also a trained personnel who has the authority to do certain other tasks, such as the notification of the athlete, accompanying and observing the athlete, and at times witnessing the provision of the sample. So that's a chaperone. Another very important one that we'll talk about in further detail is the doping control form. In short, that is DCF. I won't go into that now, but there are a few very important points that you need to know about this form, so we'll speak about that shortly. Finally, DCS, our doping control station, is simply the location where the sample collection is carried out. Okay, so before we move on to the notification process, I would like to note that we have key steps of the doping control process available in other languages. So if you want to scan this QR code with your phone, you'll be able to access the steps of the doping control process. So notification, rights and responsibilities, urine sample collection, blood sample collection in Chinese, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Korean, and Russian. We're also adding Arabic, Portuguese, and Spanish very soon. So you can always use that as your reference guide. We know that having this presentation in English limits a lot of the access. So this is our way of making it a little bit more accessible and hopefully a little bit more or a little easier to make a complicated topic more understandable for all of you joining from different parts of the world. So any doping control begins with the notification process. Let's watch a quick video to see how that works exactly.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, my name's Alana. I'm from the ITA, the International Testing Agency. Nice to meet you. You've been identified today for doping control. Can I just check your name, please?
Yes, Melody.
Yeah, great. So I'll just complete this. This is your notification form. So I'll just copy it off your identification there. And can I have your nationality?
China.
Yeah. And just noting down the date today. So on the form just down here, you've got your athlete rights and responsibilities, and it's really important that you know what those are.
Yep.
So please have a read through here. I'll get you to just sign here to say that you've been notified, and just noting down the time of notification.
Yep, correct.
And I'll just get you to sign.
Okay. Yep.
Great. So the doping control is just down the hall. So I'll get you to come with me, and then we'll complete the sample.
Sure, let's go.
Just through here.
Hello.
Hello, welcome to the doping control station. Can I just check your accreditation, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Great. Any delays today?
No delays reporting today.
Wonderful. Just checking the time. If I could just ask you to sign there, please.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Come through.
Thank you.
Great. So as mentioned in the video, it is very important that you're aware of your rights and responsibilities during the testing process. And of course, if you're athlete support personnel, I know we have a big audience of the support personnel here today, that you are also aware of these rights as you're supporting your athletes through the testing process. So let's start with the responsibilities. As you saw, it is essential that you report for testing immediately if you are selected. The athlete in the video, Melody, followed Alarna, who was doping control officer, immediately to the doping control station. You need to show a valid identification. So in the video, that would have been an accreditation, which is valid at major games, Youth Olympic Games, Para Games, Olympic Games, Pan Am Games, and so on. But in other circumstances, for example, an out-of-competition test or World Championships, let's say, a passport could be a valid identification. It is key that you remain in direct sight of the doping control officer or the chaperone at all times of the process until it's completed. And of course, you have to comply with the collection procedure. So there will be certain steps that you have to follow. We'll cover those today. And it is very important that you follow those. The rights of athletes are equally important in this process, and there's a number of them. So of course, you have the right to have a representative with you. So that can be the team manager or your coach or a team doctor, for example. You can also ask for an interpreter if one is available to have the process completed in the language that you're more comfortable with. You can also ask for a chaperone or doping control officer's identification. So at that moment when Melody was asked to show her accreditation, she could have also asked Alarna to see hers to confirm her identity. You have the right to ask any questions that you have during this process, and it is actually strongly encouraged that you ask those questions to fully understand the process. And you can request special assistance or modifications to the process. So if you are, for example, injured and you need a wheelchair, or if you're a para athlete and you just need modifications to the process, of course, you have the full right to request that. You can note any comments or concerns on the doping control form. So of course, those comments or concerns have absolutely no connection with the outcome of your test. So you should feel comfortable to write whatever you wish down. And you can request a delay for valid reasons. So below you can see some of these examples of delay for a valid reason, which could be attending a victory ceremony, finishing a training session, or competing even in further events. That can also include the cool down of your training session, receiving any medical attention, and fulfilling, for example, a prearranged media commitment. So those are all valid reasons that you could request to delay the testing for. Okay, so we've covered the rights and responsibilities, and we saw the notification video. At this point, I am going to hand it over to Marko to talk about what happens when an athlete has been notified and once they arrive to the doping control station for a urine sample collection. So over to you, Marko.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's a pleasure to talk about the urine procedure. So I'm gonna quickly show you all the material we're gonna use, just so you're more familiar with this. So this is a urine collection box. It has the number up front and it's completely sealed, as you can see. Second, we have a collection vessel, which is this. So it's also sealed. So we have part 1 and part 2. Third, I will show you a partial sample kit, also sealed. And lastly, the refractometer. So this is to measure the specific gravity of the sample once the sample is completely sealed in the bottles. Okay, so let's start. So when the notification is made and the athlete arrives at the doping control station, the doping control officer presents him with 3 separate, minimum 3 cups. So he always has to have the choice of minimum 3. Then he selects one. And before opening this, he needs to wash his hands with water, no soap. So we want to get rid of any touched external. Once he's ready, they open it. So they start by opening the bottom part like this, without touching the inside of the cup. So no fingers inside. And as you can see on the side, you have a scale which says 10 to 180. So the minimum we need is 90 milliliters for a valid sample. So once this has been done, we go together with the athlete in the bathroom to provide the sample. So I'm going to ask to pop the slide for what happens in the toilet. Here we go. So as you can see, there are 3 different scenarios. The first one is when there's a male athlete and a male doping control officer. So the athlete needs to drop his pants until his knees, lift the shirt up a little bit, and the doping control officer is standing from the side so he can see the passing of the urine from the body of the athlete into the collection vessel, as I showed you before. The second slide is for a female athlete and a female doping control officer. So the female athlete needs to be faced towards the doping control officer, so they have a good view of the passing of the urine again to the collection vessel. The last slide on your right is when we have an athlete that is a young athlete. So we might say it's a minor athlete because he or she is below 18. In this case, a representative is needed to supervise the doping control officer, and the doping control officer is watching the athlete providing the sample in the toilet. So the witnessing person, which is standing outside, as you can see on the slide, does not see the athlete directly. He's there merely to observe the doping control officer, that everything is in accordance with the rule, and he's sort of protecting the athlete because he or she is a young athlete, like I mentioned. Thank you. So let's proceed. For the purpose of this presentation, we already pre-filled the sample with juice. So it's blueberry juice in this case. I have a sample of 130 milliliters, as you can see, which is more than enough. Once we have this sample in hand, so as I mentioned before, the doping control officer is with the athlete. He waits for the athlete to remove the second part, places the lid on top of the collection vessel, needs to click a few times, and then the sample is secured in the collection vessel like this. Okay, once we've done this part, we move on to selecting a urine box. So we have 3 nice urine boxes here. The athlete always needs to select himself. We cannot enforce an athlete to take one particular box. He or she needs to have the selection of minimum 3. So I'm going to choose this one today. So everything I show you now is done by the athlete. So the doping control officer is not touching any of the material. He's merely pointing and guiding the athlete throughout the process. Only when the urine is safely stored inside the bottles, which are inside this box, I will show you in a minute, then the doping control officer can double check if the sealed samples have been properly sealed. So we open the box like this. We remove the protective plastic. If an athlete is not satisfied with the material at any point, he can choose a new one. So where the numbers are, as you can see, we lift up. And inside we have 2 nice plastic bags, 1 for each bottle. We have manufacturer's instructions, and we have 2 bottles. So A and B. B for blue, A is in the red one. So why we have an A and B sample? In the A sample, the laboratory does the analysis, at first when it arrives to the laboratory. And if we have an adverse analytical finding, which means a positive case, then the laboratory will proceed to analyze the B sample, and the B sample can be done together in the presence of the athlete or his representative. So this is why the B sample is very important, because it needs to confirm what has been found out in the A sample. Okay, let's take this out. So as you can see, there are numbers on top, numbers on the bottom. So first, the athlete needs to check if all the numbers on the box, on top and on the bottom are all the same. If the numbers are all the same, then we can proceed to opening the bottles. So as you can see on the side, there's a string you can pull from top to bottom, which helps to open the material easier. So this is a double seal that we see that nobody touched the material or tamper with the material. We remove the lid. Same for the B one, as you can see, same string in blue. We remove the top and we place it like this. So I remove the red rings. These are extra protection, so if I leave this on, and if I try to close it, it will not close. So you need to remove it, off, and I will start by dividing the urine sample into A and B. So B always first. Let me just adjust this a little bit. Yeah. So the B one is always first, and it needs to be slightly above the minimum line, which is indicated here. We have 130, so more than enough. The A1 is a bit higher, as you can see, because the A will need several analyses. The A always needs to have more than the B. So we'll pour the rest in the A. Like this. I leave a few drops in the end. The cup is designed so that it leaves a tiny bit at the end so I can measure the specific gravity. Okay, so this is all done by the athlete, like I mentioned. So we close the bottle. Same for the other one. The lids are both the same, so it doesn't matter if you mix them. Good. So now the DCO, very importantly, needs to double check if the athlete has sealed the samples correctly. So I'm going to wear gloves, because DCOs need to wear gloves when they do this in the doping control station. So I double check if it's closed properly, and I turn it over to see if there's any leakage. So same for the other one. All good. So now the samples are sealed. I'm going to replace them in this. We place them like this in the plastic bags. And we remove this white tape, as you can see on the side. We remove it like this and stick this together. So this is first sample packed. On to the next sample.
I think Lara has joined us. If you are online, Lara, can you just mute your microphone and hopefully you'll be able to join us via video soon as well.
Here we go. So as you can see inside those plastic bags, we have a small absorbing material bag. You will see it here. So this prevents the liquid from spilling all over the bag if in case there's damage to it during transportation. So we place now both bottles inside the box. And this is now packed and ready to be shipped to the laboratory. So the sample is now packed and sealed. The athlete did, I would say, 90% of the work. Now it's time to measure the specific gravity. So the DCO opens the lid, takes one small pipette, places a few drops of urine onto the refractometer, and we check the specific gravity. So you should see a slide on your screen that shows you what I'm looking at. You have a digital refractometer and an optical one. So I'm using an optical one. The digital one is a little bit smaller, and you just put a drop inside and it shows you the value. Here you have to watch through this to see the exact value. So I have 1.25, which is more than enough. So the minimum amount is 1.005 to have a valid sample. If it's below 1.005, the sample will be a diluted sample. And in this case, we need to pack the sample still as such, but you would need to provide another sample. So, like I mentioned, this is a perfect case scenario. We have a good volume and we have a very good specific gravity. The athlete has done all the packing. The procedure is completed. Now we go on to the form. We put the number, which is here on the urine collection box, and we write it also on the doping control form. It's very important to check the number together with the doping control officer, because this is the only information the laboratory will get that ties it to the athlete. So they have no personal information, only the number of the athlete. So it's very important because this will define the identity of the athlete. Once this is done, like I said, this is shipped to the laboratory, and in some cases, which is often the case when we do testing in practice, we have a lot of partial samples. So in case an athlete cannot provide the full 90 amounts or more, he or she provides, let's say, 40 amounts, then we use a special procedure. So this kit, and it a cap and a special plastic I will show you here. So we have a small plastic cap to cover the bottle, and we have a big bag to seal the whole box inside. So when the athlete leaves the doping control station and after he's ready to provide some more urine, the sample is securely stored with the doping control officer and nobody can touch it until the athlete is back. So like I said, this is one case scenario. Another is if we have a diluted sample, as I already mentioned. In this case, you need to provide an additional sample because we need to reach a valid sample. So the specific gravity needs to be high enough and the volume needs to be 90 milliliters or more in order to be able to, as you can see on the screen now, we have the one I used, the optical one, and the digital one on your right. I would just like to quickly mention, because a lot of athletes are asking us, how come I got tested 2 days ago and again I get tested on the competition? So you have to differentiate between in-competition testing and out-of-competition testing. In-competition testing is normally after you've done competing and the doping control officer selects you for testing. The analysis are in-competition analysis, so it's different to out-of-competition. Out-of-competition is done usually in training, when you're training or at your residence at home, outside of your time slot or inside of your time slot. For those who are familiar with ADAMS, though this is the system that WADA is using for whereabouts. It's completely different than in competition. That's why it can happen that you get tested, let's say on Thursday, and then another time on Saturday, on Sunday if you're competing. So thank you very much. I think this is all from me. I'm looking forward to your questions. Don't be shy after we complete our presentations. Thank you, and over to you, Olya.
Thank you so much, Marko. So there were a few slides and a few videos so far in the presentation. So I saw some questions come in. Just to confirm, this will be recorded and you will receive both the slides and the webinar presentation. So you don't need to worry if you didn't get any of the information some of the information right away. It will become available to you later. Okay, so that was the urine sample collection process as demonstrated by Marko in grape juice. Thank you for the demonstration. And we are going to speak briefly about the form that Marko has already mentioned, which carries a lot of importance in the doping control process. So before I go into those details, let's just see a quick 1-minute video of Marko once again doing the doping control form completion process here at the end of the sample collection.
So no additional samples required. So we'll just cross out all other urine box. Great. So let's just check the number again. Okay. So the next step is medication supplements for the last 7 days. If you have any, please state them here. This is if you accept or not to put your sample into further anonymous research. So it's for laboratory research. You can either say yes or no. It's totally independent of your testing for doping for this sample.
Okay, so I accept.
Okay. Do you have any comments in general about the procedure, about the
Everything was okay?
Okay, so let me just go back to the form. So you had no representative, so just cross out this box. So final time. Okay, check the form again. So we already did the notification part. Obviously the most important part is the number, so I'm gonna ask you to check it again.
Okay, great. I believe the video ended a little earlier than it was supposed to, but we got all the information that we needed there. So as you can see, the doping control form is a key document in the sample collection process. It is also a legal document that can be used in court, if ever that is the case. It holds the athlete's personal information, information for lab analysis, about medications taken, therapeutic use exemptions, and athlete's signature. So you can see a few bubbles on the screen just to show you all the information that is collected on this form. It also contains information about the notification process. So for example, who notified the athlete and at what time, information about the partial sample, about whether the athlete was accompanied or not, and any comments. So it is absolutely essential that the athletes, and if there's somebody accompanying the athlete, that they help them double and triple check this form to make sure that it is absolutely correct. It becomes a confirmation by the athlete once it is signed that everything on that form is accurate. So it is also the reason why the athletes are encouraged so many times to check those codes on top of the bottle, on the side of the bottle, on the box, on the form, and so on. The lab, once they receive the sample for analysis, do not see the athlete's name or their country. They only see that code. So that is the link between the result of the analysis and the athlete. Note that there's now a paperless system as well. So this form can be completed electronically or on a tablet. So the athletes would receive a copy of the doping control form instead of physical paper. They could scan a QR code, or it would be via email. So the next time that you're tested or that you're supporting an athlete through the testing process, it could be either one of those cases, that it's either a paper form or an electronic form. All right, so that is it on the doping control form. We've now spoken about the urine sample collection, and I believe very appropriately, Lara has been able to fix her technical issues and join us right on time. So I will take this opportunity to introduce Lara to the webinar attendees. I have your bio here that I'm happy to read out. So Lara is a biomedical science degree, holds a biomedical science degree, and has been working in doping control and blood collection for over 13 years with organizations like the US Anti-Doping Agency, the Brazil Anti-Doping Agency, among many other organizations. Lara has worked at 9 major games, including Pan Am Games, Paralympic Games, and of course the Olympic Games, most recently in Rio in 2016. And Lara currently manages testing programs for team sports at the International Testing Agency. So I should mention that we've mentioned the urine sample collection, and we've covered the form, which is exactly, well, very similar for the urine sample collection and blood sample collection. And blood sample collection is one part of the doping control process that we have not spoken about just yet. So I will now hand it over to Lara to speak about this process. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks for joining and attending this morning. Here in Brazil, it's still morning. And sorry for the mess, sorry for the connection problems, but now it's solved. So let's talk about a little bit the blood collection procedures. So the collection policy is pretty similar as the urine. So we have the kits here. So we have some slides passing through with the same points that I'm talking about. So we have the kit. We have always 3 choices at least. So we have the numbers here up, and we have the expire date here. So we need to control this very well. This is very important to see if it's in the valid or no. So after the choice, this is up to the athlete, and it's very important to say we have a specific personnel to collect blood. It's called blood collection officer or BCO in our language. So this professional can have different types of backgrounds, but it's very important to be able to collect the blood very well, because we have just 3 attempts to do it. And the second thing is very important is have some first aid notions to provide some help to the athlete if some issues happen during the procedure. But it's very rare, honestly, and I had just 2 or 3 cases of this in my whole career, so it's not so common. Then the athlete will take a look in the numbers, then open this one, and here we have inside the bag just 2 containers here with numbers in the front. See, it's kind of transparent, but I think is able to see it. So it's the number, the B1 and the A1 here. We have numbers here on the tops, the same numbers. And inside the bag, we have 2, the instructions, the numbers to put in the blood tubes, and just tiny plastic bags here to send to the lab. These ones, we don't have numbers. So we have 2 kinds of blood analysis here in doping control procedures. They can be with the yellow tubes or the purple tubes. So the next step is provide to the athlete the choices of this tube. So it depends how many tubes we need to collect, or the type. It depends of the mission order. It depends of the type of the analysis we need. So we can use 1 of these or the 4 of these. So can be minimum 3 millimeters and maximum 16. So it's just choose 1, open, and you have inside, you just take the yellow as example. So we have inside 2 tubes, 2 yellow tubes here. So we have the validity here too. So we need to take care about this date. So this one is already expired. So that's because I'm using it. And we have the purple one too. I will show you the same thing. Okay, the only thing is here we have a conservative substance, and here we call dry tube. We have this gel here. Okay, so we have the needle here, and before all the collection, the blood control officer needs to be sure all the ambient is clean. In competition, we prefer a separate room for safety, especially we have many tests at the same time. And we need to provide, if possible, a bed or some place to the athlete lay down if needed, okay? Sometimes we need to collect with the athlete in a horizontal position. So then is technical procedures. So we need to clean the area, arm, preferentially. Can be the hands, but hurts a lot, so we prefer use the arm. Then we need to choose the arm, paying attention if we have any marks or any injury in the place. So we need just to check if the arm is okay. Then clean. Normally we prefer use the gloves powder-free and latex-free. And I can talk about more of this if someone is interested. Then do the punction. So I just show you how to manage the needle. So we have this kind of needle here. It's the same one we normally use in the hospitals or clinics. So you do the punction like this, Then you connect the tube here, and the blood just went to the tube, okay? So after all of this, just you do the normal procedures. That's turn off the tourniquet and just finish the procedure. Then is the athlete's part. So the athlete, you just open the tube like this. Open this one. Sometimes they ask why we use a big tube like this, but we need to explain we not put the blood inside. We're just using to seal the tube. So you put the tube with the numbers here. So we have the sticker. Some BCOs likes to put, but I like to ask to the athlete put. So we need to put the stickers here. Okay. Then check if the numbers matching with the tube. Put inside and close. Okay, this is sealed. So the same with another one. We need to take especially care if you are taking 4 tubes because you be 2 different numbers. So we need to take care to seal, but we need to check if the numbers are matching. So you put the tube here inside of the plastic bags. Seal it. And done. We don't have a paper box for this, okay? So we have many steps to take care. And after that, we need to send this to the lab with a specific temperature. It should be refrigerated. So we have a cooler box with some plastic ices inside. And we need to put this monetary temperature dispositives inside. So here I have 2 examples. We call this temp loggers. So this is to monitor the temperature into the lab. Should be around, should be between 2 and 15 degrees, but it's too high. So we prefer keep this between 6 or 8 Celsius degrees into the lab. So we have here the slides. That's as I said, is the same. So one important detail is we need to make sure the athlete is seated for 10 minutes. If you are collecting a blood passport, we need to wait 2 hours without exercises to collect the sample.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lara. And I guess the question that is often asked is, what is the difference between a blood sample and a urine sample? So I don't know if Lara or Marco, you want to answer that question, but I know athletes ask that question a lot. And Lara, you're on mute. Or Marco, if you're able to join in.
Yep, I can answer that. So the
Sure.
urine one is, I would say, less invasive, and sometimes it takes longer, especially in competition, because after a match, especially a tennis match, let's say, they're very highly dehydrated. So we need to wait a bit more. So athletes would prefer to have a blood test. However, blood test is a little bit more invasive because we do the venipuncture, we go inside the vein to collect blood. And you have to differentiate between the analysis. We're looking for some particular things in urine and other things in blood. So that's why we need to collect either both or one or the other.
Yeah, just one point
Perfect.
to add.
Thank you.
Sorry, my
Yeah,
mic.
go ahead.
Sorry, yes, a little bit delay. My mic is not working properly still, so sorry. But we need to observe we don't have dilute samples or partial samples in blood procedures. So if you just took the 3 attempts and you are not able to have your sample, your blood sample, you just end the collection and try another day, do a report.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you both to Marco and Lara to give us for giving us this preview, at least via a webinar platform as much as we could. We showed you the process. We hope that it was helpful. I see a lot of questions coming in. We will get to as many of them as we can very soon. There's some good questions out there, and I guess Marco and Lara are going to be the experts answering those. But before we go into the Q&A, we have a couple of minutes to chat with Marc. So you just watched from the sidelines almost. Did this doping control process give you any memories, good or bad, stressful or happy?
No, definitely some good memories. I've associated doping and doping control, in my mind at any rate, with experiences that I've had a chance to be on the podium or to qualify for an event. So for me, that's definitely one of the happier memories. And probably a bad memory would always then be associated with the fact that I didn't get onto the podium and didn't have a doping test. So it meant that I had a really sucky race or something like that. So I'm very mindful of differentiating between the two, but most of the time, happy memories. And probably the happiest memory I can refer to would be qualifying to go to Olympics and having that test done almost voluntarily, but to make sure that I had a test to confirm my performance. And yeah, so that was my happiest memory in the doping set.
Indeed. For a lot of us, our best performances are always when we get selected for testing. So it's a nice party pooper moment where you don't get to celebrate because you've got to go to the doping control station. But you are an endurance athlete, so 50K race walk, which is a crazy distance. And I cannot imagine that would be easy to pee in a cup after completing a race like that.
Yeah, so just for those that aren't necessarily familiar with it, 50K race walk is for the best in the world. It's a performance time of around about 3.5 hours, just over 3.5 hours, and you can have a really miserable performance and get down to, in my sense, close to 5 hours when I raced in Doha last year. So it's really grilling, but on average, my best is just under 4 hours. And a 4-hour event, I'm sweating probably at 2 liters an hour, and I get myself into a serious state of dehydration. And the last thing on my mind often after a grueling 4-hour event is walking an extra step, let alone going for a doping control session. So that's always been really challenging for me. I think back to a couple of the opportunities that I've had to have a doping test straight afterwards, and I average probably 5 liters before I'm able to be rehydrated, which is anywhere from about 2 to 3 hours post event. So in the euphoria of finishing, then you go and sit around and you start with bottled water, and then you go into a bit of electrolytes, and you keep drinking and drinking and drinking until you can eventually pass a sample. So that's always been a challenge for me with the 50K.
And it might be, as Marco said, there's a diluted sample as well in some cases where you then have to provide another sample because the other one is just too watered down after 50K. The first time you were, yeah, go ahead.
No, carry on.
The first time you were tested, we talked about this briefly. You were quite young, and it was a stressful process, as I can imagine. Besides being tested over and over and over again, and eventually being more comfortable with the process, what are some of these tips or suggestions that you have for athletes listening in today to make them more in control of the process, and maybe from your personal experience?
Yeah, so my first experience, I recall being 16 and competing in a provincial champs in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. And I was very fortunate that my dad was also my coach at that stage, and he was able to attend and support me through the process because I was kind of oblivious to it. You know that you always want to make a team and get the medal, but at that stage I wasn't familiar with the whole testing protocol. So that was really reassuring to have a coach and a parent attending with me. Some of the tips that I would recommend people: getting to know exactly what the protocol requires, knowing how to go through it, and it's not being fearful of it. It's just understanding what's going to happen. And I think a lot of people put themselves at a uneasy situation where they think it's going to be so much more dramatic and frightening than it really is. It's just getting through the process of passing urine with somebody else watching, and that is probably the most daunting thing for anybody. It's that first time that you're having somebody watching. So it's not to say that you've got to practice that, but it's just understanding that that's all it is. It's mainly the exposure to the public, and I find that still to be a challenge. No matter how many times I've passed urine for a doping test, it's always that awkward moment where you you go into the cubicle and the door's open and you're standing there with hands basically on the floor and providing the sample. So I don't think that ever gets easy. You just learn to block it out and get on with it. So it's that would be the only tip, just to know what it entails and to prepare yourself optimally for peeing for the crowd.
Indeed, and I hope that those listening in have found the presentation helpful, even if it is a virtual and we're not able to do this face-to-face, but there are some key steps, and even knowing your rights and responsibilities to say that, yes, if I'm an athlete in endurance sport where it's going to take me a long time to get rehydrated, that I can finish my cool down. I have these things that I can do while I'm waiting to be able to provide a sample. So just knowing these rights absolutely helps a lot too, I'm sure. Now you're on the other side of the sports system. You've had that experience as well. You worked as a sports administrator for University Sport South Africa, and there you accompanied athletes to doping control. So do you have any tips for those who are working with athletes and going through this process that you can share with us today?
I definitely feel that working with the medical team and especially with the team doctors and team physicians to make sure that the athletes are educated before they leave for an event. So I find planning and preparing athletes for the inevitable doping test is probably the best thing, and making sure that as coaches that they're prepared and they're aware of where the athletes are, who's likely to be a candidate for a medal, and accordingly who's likely to be going into doping control, so that there's somebody available to stay with them. Often, especially in track and field events, you can have somebody that's got to stay behind at the last event of the evening, particularly at a championship, and it's close to midnight and everyone else has left, and they need to have somebody from the team management available. So just planning for that, making sure that the team management is aware that there's a coach or a manager available to attend. That's very often the best thing. I've enjoyed making sure that the medical team is prepped and they've spoken and done a presentation to the athletes before departure, sometimes in a games village. And an event like the FISU Summer Universiade is a fantastic breeding ground for athletes, but opportunity for them to hone their skills before going into a big international competition and championship. So it's very much a dress rehearsal for the Olympics, and the opportunity for the talent to be showcased there, and for athletes to see what it would be like at a student games. And it's a very real preparation for the Olympics. So yeah, that makes a big difference, knowing what to expect and what the athletes are likely to entail and experience going into the entire process.
Absolutely. And a lot of the time now, it's circling back. Maybe I'm biased a little bit as the education manager, but it circles back to education and sharing of the information. So if any of you listening in have further questions or want to know where you can get those resources, let us know. We will show our email address at the end one more time so you can contact us. But I'll finish with you, Mark, on a lighter note. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your funniest, the weirdest, the craziest doping control experience?
For me, the most memorable one was I planned a national championship, or attended a national championships down on the East Coast in Durban, South Africa, and I'd flown down from Pretoria, and I knew that I was going to get back, finish the race in the morning around 9 a.m. I should have plenty of time to catch my flight back at 2 o'clock to Pretoria, and then attend the wedding at 4 o'clock. And everything was perfectly scheduled except for the fact that I had fear to pee. And I finished the race, had a doping control, and it was all segmented. All I just needed to do was be able to pee on time, and I couldn't. And I had to do the medal ceremony and then came back, and there were people following me around the entire time. And eventually, about 10 minutes before I had to leave for the airport, managed to get out the necessary urine sample, got in the car, drove to the airport, and then once the floodgates had opened, it's basically go through passport control kind of thing. Oh, need to pee. Get on the plane, need to pee. Get off the plane, need to pee. And that's probably the worst thing about doing endurance events. It's just building up fluids and then having to release it the rest of the afternoon. So that's probably my funniest and worst memory from that, because just making life stressful because it just takes so much more time. But eventually got to the wedding, and all's well that ends well. Got the medal to show for it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing a bit of your experience with us, Mark. I really appreciate it. And we wanted to always have an athlete perspective on any information that we deliver to you. So even if we are talking about something very straightforward and serious as a thing like doping control, there is always a room for us to speak about experiences and what we can take away as those practical tips. All right, so we have just about 15 minutes to address some questions from the audience. Marko, I see a lot of technical stuff, so I think I'm going to direct some of these to you. I just am going to mention one more time that we are recording everything and the slides will be available, so don't worry about that part. But getting on to our first and I guess the highest rated question from Michelle. It's ridiculous that soap is not permitted and that the athlete is asked to rinse the hands really well. Why can this not be a part of the procedure post-COVID-19? So, Marko, if you have an opinion on that.
I completely agree with you, Michelle. I think it's important to respect hygiene and standards that are upon us from WHO and from the governments first, and try to incorporate the anti-doping procedure while respecting all those guidelines. So in my opinion, there is no harm in rinsing really well with either disinfectant or soap, and then before we start the process for anti-doping, we just wash it and thoroughly dry with first with water and then continue the procedure only with water. So I would wash it with soap or with disinfectant before starting, and then proceed to water only when we do the anti-doping process.
Thank you. Another one related to COVID-19. I don't have a name, but it's from a guest listening in. What is the impact of the current corona COVID-19 virus on the entire testing procedure? And perhaps we're not able to speak on behalf of the entire system, but Marko, I'm not sure if you have anything to contribute to this question.
Yeah, basically we had, many of the anti-doping organizations had to adapt to the current situation. So there's new rules, guidelines issued by WADA that we need to respect country by do testing, and we need to monitor country by country what the health ministers are saying, what the procedures are and the restrictions that governments are enforcing upon us to do the testing. And with all these elements combined, we can still do some testing, but it has been heavily impacted by the virus so far. Yeah.
And if you have any more follow-up questions that we don't necessarily answer directly, or if you still need more information, once again, you can always reach out to us. We have other members of the science and medical team who are more informed on all these, the impact of the virus and other things that we can follow up on those questions, certainly, and give you more information on that. So I'm going to read the next question from Julian, and I believe it's quite similar, but I'll get through it and see how we can answer. Marko mentioned that no soap is allowed and that the testee should check the material. In time of COVID-19, more and more NATOs and other service providers will most likely be looking to respect those barrier gestures, including limiting contacts. How likely is that to be lasting, and how will the BCOs and DCOs, how will they be impacted in terms of education, implementation, etc.? How flexible and reactive is the process to the evolution of the sanitary and social situation? So I'm not sure how to answer this question, but Marko, if you have any feedback or any first thoughts.
Yeah, so as we already mentioned, we're following first WADA issued rules, and every few weeks they adapt these rules and then issue new guidelines on how to proceed with testing. It's very important to respect the sanitary measures, so we try to disinfect the doping control station, hands, wear masks before arriving and at the doping control station. So all these procedures need to be put in place as long as necessary to protect the athletes and to protect the sample collection personnel, so that we don't jeopardize the athlete for further competition or their health. And I think it will last until the situation improves, and hopefully it's not too long, because it's really starting to have a heavy toll on the, like I said, on the testing, on the mental restraints and on the physical restraints of the athletes, because of course they cannot compete normally, they cannot train, and we cannot test them properly in all the countries when we want to. So hopefully the situation improves very soon.
And of course, it is a rapidly evolving situation, the one that we have not had experience facing before. So we are all monitoring daily to see how it's going to affect us, and where we can start testing and where there are still restrictions. So day by day, it is changing. I will move on to a question from Sanit. Can the athlete take a photo of the sample box on the mobile, so I guess on the cell phone, for making sure that it is his or her sample, although he or she was given the notification form? So can an athlete take pictures during the doping control process of the box?
Normally in the doping control center, a doping control station, the pictures are not allowed, because we don't, it's a private facility, and to protect the integrity of the sample and personal information of the doping control officers, of the athlete and so on, we don't allowed to take pictures. So, but in this case, I don't really understand why a picture would be needed, because you receive a copy of the form and you have either a paper form or an electronic copy of the form with the sample number on it. So I don't understand why you need an additional picture of the sample number. In my opinion, you could take a picture of the sample. I mean, we cannot physically stop you to do so. I as the doping control officer, would advise you not to take pictures. However, I don't see why you would need to do this, like I said, because you receive a copy of the number. So in my opinion, you already have what you need.
And the best thing to do is to double check all the numbers. So before you sign the form, you do the second or the third check of making sure that what was on the bottle and on the box is on the form. And the same for blood and urine, you always check the numbers. So once you're absolutely sure that this information is accurate, you can safely and securely sign the form and keep a copy for your records. Okay, great. The next question is from Ilse. Is there, I apologize if I mispronounce the name, is there an educational program where one can follow a course to become a DCO? And indeed, there are many NATOs that have different training programs and different courses around the world, but the ITA, the International Testing Agency, is indeed implementing a doping control officer training program. So it's in the final stages of development. There will be an online learning course and a face-to-face component to this program. So it will be available very soon for anyone who's interested in applying for this program and becoming a certified DCO through the International Testing Agency. That will be available and will be eventually, once it's ready to be launched, will be communicated through our channels. A question from Paolo. Do you use digital forms, maybe on an iPad, to record data about the test, or are you considering to implement this for the future? So if this is referring to the doping control form itself, indeed, there is a paperless system that exists at the moment. It's not implemented everywhere, but there are two ways now to fill out the doping control form. So it could be on an iPad digitally, or it can be a paper form. And I'm not sure if there's any other reason or any other area of the doping control doping control process that could be digitalized. So I hope I answered this question correctly. Marco, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I think this was in reference to the paperless system. So yeah, I would say we already have this as an option. So many of anti-doping organizations are using the paperless system, and for the moment it proves to be very effective.
Great. Okay, a question from Michelle. Having dealt with several complaints about unnatural behavior of a DCO, would it be possible for the third-party observation to be introduced to protect athletes, particularly vulnerable ones? Your image shows a very large toilet. What do you think about this third-party observation, Marko?
So I think the athlete has the option to bring a representative. So in my opinion, I don't see an issue with that. So if he or she does not trust the doping control officer, they can always ask for a representative. We encourage in special circumstances, if it's a minor or if the athlete is handicapped. So we always encourage to have a representative, but I don't see any issues with having a representative present, as long as there's only one, maximum two if you need an interpreter. Otherwise, it gets very crowded in the doping control station, and we need to respect the privacy of the athlete and of the personnel.
Mm-hmm. And indeed, you are, as an athlete, always, I think, Lara, I'm not sure if you're on mute. I think you're typing. I know that your camera is not working, but I think your mic is working. So indeed, the athletes are always encouraged to bring a person, an accompanying person with them. They can choose who that person is. So in those cases where they're not comfortable with the DCO, that is strongly encouraged and very much encouraged for minor athletes under 18. Same for an interpreter as well. That is one of the rights of the athlete to have an interpreter. And at larger events, at major games, there's also a observation program. So there are independent observers watching over how doping control is run at these events, and of course providing their feedback back to WADA and their observations. So it is not, of course, for every single doping control to be observed like this, but it is a way of monitoring the quality of the program. We'll go to Michelle again. Another question here. We have a few more minutes, so it's great that we can get through as many questions as we can. Cleaning these refractometers is essential. The athlete should be allowed to ask for a refractometer to be cleaned, reset, and the sample retested before a decision is made to force the athlete to provide a further sample. Most DCOs will simply wipe, which is not cleaning. So yes, I guess, Marko, the refractometer is clean between tests?
You have to clean and recalibrate it every time. So yeah, this would definitely apply. So it's a question of the DCO quality, I would say. So you need to be very specific and very thorough when you check every little detail, and after every measure, especially if it's on the limit, I would say you need to clean the refractometer and recalibrate it on 0, so we don't have any errors in the measurements.
Mm-hmm. And for athletes who are less familiar, I think it helps to have somebody experienced with them accompanying as well to know all these details. But in theory, and I guess that is a very big part of the reason why we have a DCO training program, is to make sure that the DCOs who are conducting tests are indeed respecting all of these procedures. Thank you, Michelle. We'll go to Zaida. What about the changes in volume and density of urine according to the new code? According to the new 2021 code. I'm not sure what the question is exactly, but maybe you have a comment, Marko?
Yep, so I know what you're referring to. We didn't want to get into too much detail, especially for those who are not familiar with any side of the anti-doping process. So with the new changes, I will just mention it briefly. If an athlete has a volume of 90 milliliters, the specific gravity needs to be 1.005. So from 90 to 150. So if the athlete has 150 or more, the specific gravity can be reduced to 1.003. Those are the new implementations already in force. So if the athlete in one go, so not in partial samples, but in one go can provide 150 milliliters or more, then the specific gravity can be 1.003. So 2 points below the normal average.
Great, thank you, Marko. Michelle, I love it. Michelle, you have a lot of questions. Is ITA using electronic forms? We work with different agencies, so national anti-doping organizations and private companies as well. So if I'm not mistaken, Marko, it depends on each of the
provider,
authorities that we work with? on the
Exactly.
provider.
It
Okay.
depends on each provider.
And
So some use paper forms. It depends on the location as well, because if you're using electronic devices in Africa, not everybody will have emails or QR codes, scans. So it's maybe easier to use doping control paper forms. So we adapt on every situation and on every doping control available.
mm-hmm. And at the next games in Tokyo, that will be a paperless system, so an electronic system. That's right. Then Professor Hosni Ahmed has a question about a previous meeting and improper selection of NATO to work as a DCO. So I think it's quite a specific question. If there's a concern there, perhaps that's something we can address directly. So if you want to email us more information, we'll be happy to answer that. We will probably need a bit more context, but we're certainly more than happy to follow up on this question with you. I don't know if Lara can hear us, but there's a question about a dried blood spot sample.
Yes, I'm here.
And I don't know if the question from Mark is, how are dried blood spots sampled? So do you know anything about that you can tell us today?
Yes.
So maybe just the procedure itself and what a dried blood spot is.
So talking about the DBS, we call DBS to be easier. The DBS is a dispositive in the test. Right now, just a tiny amount of providers are using this. So it's a dispositive when we can draw blood not using needles. So you can just attach the dispositive in the athlete's skin, and you have the blood by micro needles, but it's not a specific needle. So we can have not a lot blood. So after that, we can collect the blood inside the dispositive and basically put in a special paper to send to the lab. So the good thing is we don't need to refrigerate the sample. It's easier to send to the lab, but it's still in tests. So maybe in the next years it will be able to be used.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it's still a new process, and at the moment the blood is collected through the vials, and as Lara has described, but we're happy to answer more questions about that if you have them. All right, we have 3 minutes before we wrap up this webinar, and I'm going to finish with a question from Faye. Maybe Marco, can athletes have a cigarette before giving blood or urine sample?
That's an interesting, I would say it's very hard because you're not allowed to smoke in closed spaces. So, however, the athlete is responsible for knowing what they put inside their body. So drinking, eating, or smoking. So you cannot stop somebody from doing something, but I would not advise it because it's against the sports ethics. So there's no alcohol or cigarettes or anything like that. So, but again, like I said, we cannot force athletes to do or to not do something. So if he or she wants to go for a cigarette, of course, being chaperoned from the notification until the sample collection procedure, then you can only write a comment and advise against, but yeah.
May not be a valid reason to delay the doping control, the sample collection. But all right, so thank you everyone who contributed with questions. Some of these difficult and very important questions. If you still have anything that you want to send our way, you can email us at education@ita.sport. We'll put that email address on the screen so you can see it. I also want to thank our presenters, Lara, Marco, and Mark, who've taken some of their time to be here with us today and to share their expertise and their experiences. This will wrap up the webinar for today, the doping control process webinar. Stay in touch with us using either LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook. You can also use these social media platforms to register for the upcoming webinars. So the next one will be on Tuesday, June 2nd, and we will discuss principles and values. So if you have any of those more theoretical questions and you want to talk about rights and responsibilities as well, beyond the context of the doping control station and the doping control process, we can see you then, and we will open registration for that webinar exactly a week before. So once again, a big thank you to everyone who joined. Stay in touch with us. Please feel free to email us. Have a good night, have a good evening, have a good morning, wherever in the world you are. And thank you once again. Bye for now.